Good morning and welcome to another Tuesday tour. It's John Sauter along with Michael Fairchild behind the camera, coming to you from a beautiful spring morning on campus. Today we're going to feature Cary Quadrangle and the Cary Knight Spot. The Cary Knight Spot is looks like it's headed for renovation and might not be here very long. So we wanted to make sure we kind of got this as an archive show to talk about that. But you can see where we're located with the beautiful Purdue Gateway behind me at the corner of University and Stadium Street. It's checkout week, and so you may see some students moving their belongings out of Cary Quadrangle. And so Cary Quadrangle, let's talk about that. This wonderful storied history in Cary. Franklin Masters Cary was the person that made it possible. He was a very successful industrialist here in Lafayette, president of a couple of different companies. Now this is back in the 1920s or so. And Franklin Masters Cary had a tragic incident where he lost his son, Franklin Levering Cary. Franklin Levering Cary was 18, was due to come to Purdue and had appendicitis and died. And was always wanting to do something to have a memorial for his son. He was coming to Purdue. Franklin loved Purdue. And so about this time, R.B. Stewart is on campus. And just to give you a feel for it, the Union Building is going to be opening up in 1924. Ross-Ade Stadium, just down the block here, was going to open up in 1924. We're really going through one of our growth phases. And R.B. Stewart recognized that we needed some quality housing on campus. Up to this point, we had a small housing facility for men, Purdue Hall, but most of the men were housed either in fraternities or off campus in boarding houses. So R.B. was a big fan of campus housing, which we're all thankful for. It brought me to Purdue originally, just because of his organizational structure and just because of his approach to housing. And that was to have quality housing. And so R.B. approaches Franklin Cary saying, I've got a wonderful idea for a memorial. We're going to build a residence hall and name it after your son. And Franklin originally was a little hesitant, and so the story is that R.B. drove Franklin up and down Northwestern Avenue, R.B. said 100 times or so, but they would look over at the football stadium and say, Franklin, this would be a wonderful location for a residence hall. As fans come to every football game, they're going to walk past and walk through your facility. But Franklin, he actually wanted it on campus. He wanted it where St. Thomas Aquinas is on campus, right in the heart of campus. But he finally convinced Franklin. Franklin gave $50,000 towards the construction of this hall. In today's money, that's about $750,000. And he subsequently gave two more gifts of $50,000. So a significant financial contribution. And first hall was opened, Franklin Levering Cary Hall East. Cary East, it became known. Eventually they added Northeast, Northwest, West, and South Hall. South Hall behind me was added in 1939. So during that period of time they added that. 1,500 men lived here, and it is still one of the largest residence halls in the country, and one of the largest that houses just men. And so it opened up, and in the 30s and the 40s and the 50s, actually, it was quite the thriving place. A lot of club activities. Men would want to come here and live here all 4 years and graduate from here. It was better than they had at home or any place else. Even the greatest generation, when they were coming back, it was just a nice facility. They were quite a social operation. In fact, they had formal dances. In 1939, they had a formal dance over in the Union Building, and they had the Ted Weens Orchestra here with a young Italian singer named Perry Como. Perry Como sang for their dance in 1939. Times have changed, and there's a lot more housing available, so the popularity is not quite as there, but we have any number of students. And we've paid attention to this facility. We've renovated it many times. And so for facilities that are 80, and this hall's over 90 years old, it's in excellent condition. In fact, between 2000 and 2006, we actually took 3 rooms and made 2 air condition the rooms, put bathrooms between the rooms, have walk-in closets with all the technology they need. For a male student who likes sports, you're right across the street from Mackey Arena and the football stadium. It's the place to be. Before we move inside, I guess I have to mention one more tradition I know many of you would like me to mention, the Nude Olympics. The Nude Olympics were here between roughly 1970 and 1990. It kind of came out of the streaking phase that was taking place in the 70s. And initially it was just kind of a lark kind of a thing to do. Eventually it became kind of an endurance race, gained in popularity, and so it is what it sounds like. The men and an occasional female would run completely nude around the inner courtyard of the quad, and the idea was to stay out there as long as you could. They became, of course, very sophisticated. They would totally grease up with Vaseline because it was the coldest night of the year. We're talking wind chills of minus 20 or 30 or so. And unfortunately, like all good things, it was so popular that pretty soon it was getting a little bit out of control. And Olympics is a real compliment in that it's organized. This was not. And so if you can imagine, 2,000 to 3,000 people gathered. There's barely enough space for the people to run. And as they run, they're throwing water balloons and any liquid they can come up with on the people that are running. And pretty soon alcohol got involved with it, and pretty soon there was damage and the crowd got raucous. And so about the mid-90s or so, we had to put an end to the Nude Olympics. But many of you might have enjoyed it. I can tell you, on the coldest night of the year when my phone rang at home at 11:30 at night, it was not my favorite time to come in. But I did, because the media, of course, would be there, and so somebody had to talk with them and deal with all the things that were going on. But many great traditions here in Cary Quadrangle, and certainly one of them is the Cary Knight Spot right behind me. The Cary Knight Spot is kind of their grill snack bar area that many of the students used. In fact, a lot of the staff who worked at Mackey, Lambert, and some of the surrounding buildings used to come here for lunch. That's kind of what we want to highlight today with their own traditions. And so that's what we're going to do. Let's work our way inside. Okay, we're inside the Cary Knight Spot and this interesting stairwell, and maybe some of you again might remember this. The post office used to be here originally, hallway down this way, hallway down that way, and the original post office in Cary, great light fixture that we come under here. Post office was moved to Southwest as they wanted to enlarge the night spot, and so they did, and now it accommodates as many as 150 people or so during regular times. Right now with COVID, actually this is a total carry-out operation, and so it's kind of stark. Actually, they've set up some of the tables and chairs for us just for the video, because we want to talk about those. But first I want to highlight the Cary Knight, about a 3-foot replica here that used to be stolen and ransomed back in the day, but it's now here in a secure display case. It's the Knight Spot. I've done a fair amount of inquiry as to how it got that name, and the best we can come up with was that the front of Cary and the tower area looks sort of like a castle, and perhaps the knights who defended the castle were associated with that. A knight, the castles, and here it is, it's the Knight Spot. So that's the best they can come up with in terms of trying to kind of define it. But a great snack bar, a great place to stop for snacks. Again, it's carry out right now. I want to highlight the one of the old signs in the Cary Knight Spot for a gathering place. We actually have a couple of pictures of the way it used to look. It's been renovated many times, and again, this was the post office area here. And we even have a mini mart here right now. This is strictly for the COVID operations, and it's become very popular. It may stay, but we're not quite sure about that yet. And so now we're going to skip through and go by some of the booth areas to really something we want to highlight, one of the more interesting and unique traditions of the place, and that are these senior tables. Senior tables where seniors, if you lived here all 4 years and you're a senior and you graduate, you have the honor of actually coming down and either engraving or etching or painting or whatever you want to do, your name and some of your involvements while you're in Cary. And so this tradition started, I think, in the early 60s, and it went to as late as the early 2000s or so. And again, change starts to happen. By the early 2000s, we don't have as many seniors living here, and the whole concept of this tradition, through lots of encouragement, they just still couldn't get the students to do this. But we've accumulated a fair amount. They're traded out. In fact, we're going to go from here up to the west attic, where they've saved a dozen or two of the old tabletops. And so we're going to be able to have a look at some of the tabletops. So this one, 1971, we can see C.W. Schnackle, Bill Schnackle. I know Bill Schnackle. He was the president of Cary from 69 to 70. Bill eventually went into the housing business, worked many schools, and eventually came back, worked, and retired from Purdue. And you look down farther yet, J.B. Winings. This is Jeff Winings. Jeff Winings became a very beloved police officer for the university that we worked with for many years. And on it goes. And so here's some schools, some folks in the vet school. Here the executive officers are, for that particular year. And you can just see the very interesting designs. Looks like entomology might have been a major of this person right here. Here's another table. This is from 1972. Agriculture, obviously, was very important to this particular student. And you see the different, here's some folks who were in pharmacy, class of 72. And maybe some of you are watching there now. Here's old math. That could be a special brew they had here, I suppose. We go to this table here, and you see a lot of the names. Here's Matthew Shrubin. Looks like he was in the Glee Club. That's the Glee Club logo. We'd like to point that out. Might have been an aviation major right here. Here's a great drawing of chemistry, some chemistry lab equipment for this particular person. This is 1994. Larry Schmidt was an ME in that particular year. Then we go to this table. This table is 2015, and a nice variety of aero, nice drawings, very picturesque. And one name I want to highlight, and that one is the one right here. Sven Rudman IV, graduated in 15. Actually, he's the third in 3 generations to live in Cary. And actually, we have found his father's name on another tabletop, and we'll be looking at that later on. Grandfather, who graduated back in 1955 or so. I'm not sure the tabletops were started back then, but we did capture Dad in one of our explorations. So the night spot, great spot to catch a snack either at noon or late at night still, and great tradition. And the tabletops are a part of that. Now we're going to make our way up to the west attic and have a look at some more tabletops. Okay, we have made our way, as you've seen, all the way up until the attic on the West Hall. Quite a little hike to get here, but a very well-maintained attic, I can tell you that. And they have maintained a lot of the tabletops over the years. And so there's probably over 24 different tabletops, and the folks here have done a really nice job of actually categorizing them by decades. And so, oldest one we found, 1959, right here, with all the different names, as we talked about. A lot of seniors who graduated wanted to get their names on it. Here's a very well done top from the 60s. This is 1967. I should point out, I think they've told me these are poplar. And so once the students finish, they take them over to the machine shop and they put a special finish on them. Just really a nice effort across the campus. Interesting drawing on this particular one. You can see the variety of things. Perhaps this person was in Tomahawk, the honorary, with some of the things there that were going on. This is all from the 60s. Here we're into the 70s, 1977, and a monorail. Must have been an engineering student. Obviously here a civil engineering student. Some very precise lettering on this one here. In fact, all the names are very well done here. Then we go on to the 80s. This is 1987 senior class, and you can see William Wingate was on this one. Here looks like another person in aero engineering involved in some of these things. Some of the drawings. Now we're into the 90s, and you can see some very well done planes down here. Here's a member of the crew team in this particular shot. Alfredo Remy was there. I know that name. I think he really contributed to the crew team effort. And then we get to the 2000s or so. This is 2008. Not as many names, not as many seniors, but a very well done plate in the middle. And actually you can see Cary Con. I understand that was a very popular card game, and there were some video game replicas down there. And encouragement, get out while you still can, to all those that we're going to follow. So great tradition with the tabletops from the Cary Knight Spot and other tabletops here. If you're interested in seeing some of these, you might think you need to have a name on one of these tabletops. I'm sure they'd be happy to talk to you about that. We're going to conclude down in the lobby where there's some more tabletops. We'll see you down there. We are back now in our fourth site, and that is into the Cary lobby. Originally, this was the main office area for Cary. We passed it just a little bit ago, the new one. But now this is the University Residences Alumni and Guest Center. So this is where a lot of tours come, and they talk about histories of the halls and that sort of thing. Very interesting architecture, beautiful facility that Walter Schroeder had designed originally. In fact, he had a great drawing that he convinced Franklin Cary that this is what the facility would look like. And so you get a feel for all of that as you see the paneling and things in this wonderful facility. Again, that still remains popular for a lot of students, particularly because their father or their grandfather lived here. And saying that, here we have some more tables. And so more senior tabletops. This is one from 2018. Looks like we had a nice group of resident assistants. We used to call them residence hall counselors. Now they're called resident assistants. On this particular table, and on this table, interesting designs. Here's a mechanical engineering grad, talks about the shot to the moon, the Armstrong landing on the moon, very well depicted. But a highlight I want to show you is a photograph. This is actually put into the table, and here we have Sven Rudman III. And so we saw his son on a previous table. This is Dad. Grandfather, again, was here in 1955. 3 generations have stayed in Cary, and it's not that unusual. We have generation after generation that does stay here. In fact, Arthur Hansen, he was the president of Cary Quad during his term in 1980. They had their picture taken with our 8th president, Arthur Hansen. Arthur Hansen actually lived in Cary Quad. He was an alum of the university, and he was actually a residence hall counselor during his time down in the 40s. Because during the 40s, he was here as a part of the war effort. In fact, Cary, in its storied history, had a couple of years where it was co-ed, and that is East and Northeast actually had women living there as a part of the Navy and the Army and the Army's Officer Development Corps. In fact, Arthur Hansen's future wife, Nancy, actually lived in Cary East. They knew each other at the time, many years separated, but eventually they were married when they were a couple here. I want to conclude by pointing out some of the furniture. And behind me, you see some of the Viking oak furniture from the Rom Weber Furniture Company. very popular from the 70s and much earlier, actually from the 30s to the 80s. It was popular from the 30s to the 80s or so. Made in Batesville, Indiana. Very durable, high quality furniture. In fact, halls built back then at Notre Dame, at Indiana University, Miami of Ohio, would often get this furniture because it would last forever. This furniture has been here for around 80 years or so. Now it's been reupholstered, I suspect, 4 or 5 times, but the base of the furniture is still here, and you'll see this furniture throughout Cary Quadrangle. Again, R.B. Stewart wanted quality campus housing. His philosophy was the students will treat the furniture, the condition of the furniture that they find. You have high quality furniture, they'll treat it with respect, and it's true. It's true. For many years, I can proudly say, we didn't even have damage deposits for the students who lived with us because there was such minimal amount of damage done to anything, to the facilities, to the furniture, anything like that. We didn't have to worry about it. That's because they planted a seed way back then about good quality furniture and that sort of thing. So we hope you enjoyed this tour of Cary Quad and of the Knight Spot. I want to make sure I thank Brian Siller, who's been with us and walking us around this morning, Andy Robeson, who just went out of his way to get us pictures and things set up, Elizabeth Hartley, who did a lot of background work and got a lot of the photographs for us. Really was a combined effort to try to tell this story to you. We hope you enjoy it. We hope you'll come back and visit Cary. Hopefully somebody will recognize their name or a friend's name on one of these tabletops. That's what it's all about at Purdue University. Great tradition for us Boilermakers. So till the next show, hail Purdue.